Hey there, greetings to my people from here at the Great Start Studio, where all of my drumming dreams are coming true. It's true. So this is where I'm shooting a video of the entire instructional series here in the studio, the 13 volumes of the London's Great Start Drum Set series. It's printed and the Kindle versions are available on Amazon as well as on my website, which is London's Great Start Drum Set. You can go there and check it all out. All my new videos from the studio will be available on that website for online lessons. Today I'm going to be talking about revealing some of my original drum heroes, what I call the Artistic Influence series. Drummers that I can actually see some of their playing in mine, that they've influenced me to that level. Drummers who truly changed my playing for the better, all the way through. There's some influence there in my actual hands and feet when I play. If in the studio, if I made posters of all the tribute, as a tribute to all the people, it'd just be every inch of every wall would be covered. It's just that these are the ones that have really, really influenced me in some foundational sort of way. So I made these posters as a tribute and a reminder of these great players. They're in my office. I'll be showing you. There's just too many to cover them all, but a handful that have really actually, I can see in my playing. There's so many great players who have inspired me in my drumming, but these are the select ones that have some way become a part of my style, my diversity, my teaching, my writing, and helped me develop my unique voice, which is a hard thing to find. You have to really listen inside. So anyway, enjoy the whole Artistic Influence series, and I'll be running them down, and I'll see you at the end. So this brings me to video 9 of my Artistic Influence series of posters in my office of drummers who basically wildly influenced me in some way. That brings us up to Dave Garibaldi. Dave Garibaldi is the longtime famous drummer from Tower of Power. Decades and decades and decades with that band from Oakland. And but I never knew him from that. I never knew any of the Tower of Power music until later. It was his writings in Modern Drummer that I was so attracted to. I copied them all out and put them in this file. Those articles just radically changed my life. They just his approach, the linear sort of approach, where it was like, for the most part, like a fully linear idea. That I was so hungry for that kind of idea, and that is one of the things that I built all of my playing out of, is this linear idea that I call linear squared, where there's linear at the same time. Well, his thing was so detail driven. It's just details. That's like the smallest sound of just your stepping on your hi-hat is a note, right? That little sound can turn the whole phrase. And then with his accents, the use of his accents, so particularly placed. There's not just where your hands naturally accent. It's the way that you accent it to bring out. It's almost like adding a fifth limb by creating these accents. And then, my mind just goes on fire. If you get 3 things going on, which is what you have to do to kind of play in a band, right? You have to have kind of 3 things, and your left foot kind of is just an ornamentation of things for your other 3 limbs. You could be, I've seen people in bands who've never opened up their hi-hat, not one time in the whole show. Completely possible. I always thought drumming was a 4-way event. And so when I get 4 things going on, that's what I say. If I could bounce a beach ball on my head, I sing, I can't get enough things going at the same time. When I actually have accents happening, it is literally like adding that fifth limb. Dave's use of all of these tiny textures, and then later when he wrote Future Sounds, and there was I don't know if anybody remembers this. There was like a double issue of Modern Drummer that had like every known book that was ever made in publication that was still available. And they had it listed, and they had, I circled all the ones for drum set, and they had it down to like these little symbols so that they could concise it down. And every time I had, $10 or $15, I would send off for a book. And I had like a couple hundred books laying around. I mean, I had books on these charts, and I was really into this Stephen Covey sort of time management. I wore this timer around, for a year and timed everything I did, wrote it down in this journal so I knew where all my time was going. And then I had this giant chart that went all the way around my room, which had all my time management, how much time and how many pages and which ones I was going to work on each day. So I was really obsessed with going through all these books. When I got to Future Sounds, it became the flashpoint for all the things that I was working on. And I pounded that book to death until it was, you couldn't read it. The pages were all messed up, and I'd written over everything, rewrote everything. It was just a giant mess. So I ordered another copy of it and then rewrote all over that again when I had more ideas, and it just became this idea springboard like crazy. The only downside that I found of Dave's permutation idea is that it basically filled up a whole page of 16 variations by permutating a note from the end of 16th notes to the beginning and then back, and they just kept shifting it around 16 different shifts. But really, which is interesting, right? It's a math term, but it's a really interesting way of approaching everything. But I was in this transition away from just exercise-based. I'd written like 1,000 pages of it, and I was like, you know what? This is taking me nowhere. I need to get back to the core trunk of what music requires. And that's why I built the series out of that, as opposed to, because I've already gone full circle in this other idea. So you could go your whole life and just do exercises and never know how to play a song. I can't say this enough. Well, this idea that Dave had of this permutation just radically changed my thinking in how I could approach any given measure. The problem is that once I started going through them, I started marking them in a very particular way of which ones that I felt were the most useful, which ones were the ones that to music, right? Because the pulses kind of need to land in a certain sort of a way. Otherwise, it just gets too quirky. It's completely easily possible to have notes that are possible on the page, but basically ridiculous to listen to. So once you start realizing this, you write, a couple million notes, you start realizing how easy this is. Ink on a page has a totally different life. This process I had through Dave's book was so radically transforming for me. So I just wish that he had done the extra step, which was to go through all 16 permutations and save us the trouble and pick out the ones that he thought. I know it almost goes against having the permutation, but you could say I had 16 permutations and I boiled it down to these 7 that are the ones that are the most useful in music situations, right? Because then it becomes less math and more back to what feels right. So, because pulses exist out there, whether it's subjective or not, these are the pulses that music requires, and these are the things that rise to the top because people like them. So that's a fact that's out there regardless of your subjectivity. So Dave, this is why I'm so excited about talking about this thing. Future Sounds really, really changed my life. And I still had no idea of the music context that Dave was in with Tower of Power. I had a completely radically different idea of what that band was like. When I heard it, I was like, oh, this is like a soul band. This is an R&B, groovy, mid-tempo, nothing's pressed. But when you get just on the page and you're looking at Soul Vaccination and all these other songs, you just kind of get the idea that this is like some real fusion-y sort of music. It isn't. It's very groove-oriented. And that's why, Dave won all those funk awards and, on the honor roll right away with Modern Drummer, because it was technical, but it was technical in a way that grafted in with like groove music, like completely groove music. And Dave is like, we had a clinic with Dave at the store where I was teaching in. It was completely flat, like flat affect, like pretty, very to business, straightforward. I'm much more emotional in my in my appeal for how I relate to the world, and and music and relationships and everything. I just have a lot more, I don't know, I guess, vibrancy. But that kind of subtlety of character does not mean that there aren't details of art. And so he was trying to express these details in a clinic. Now, clinics are kind of built on the flamboyant sort of idea of kind of playing outside, and you expect somebody to kind of just be flailing, in this sort of attention-getting thing. Dave's whole thing is not that. Anybody who's seen Dave play in Tower of Power or otherwise, he's very fixed, he's very controlled, he's very slight in his movements. He is not a flamboyant sort of soloist. He is a groove player, and when he comes up with these parts, he is crafting. He is doing this is the thing that I got from Dave, is that it is possible to take something that on the face of it, stylistically wise, could be just completely regular. Like it could be just like beat 1, page 1, right? Just laying it down. But instead, he's found ways of making these subtle changes that will turn a phrase in the most unexpected way for your hands. I can't tell you how many times I read one of those articles or went through one of the things and Funky Beat, and I'm like, this is such an unusual layup of notes in this phrase. It comes at you in the exact opposite way that you physically would normally approach it. So many, after you teach thousands of people, you see people over decades of time, and you start realizing that people fall into these certain sort of physical habits. Like the most basic physical habits is you just play eighth notes with your right hand, do, da, do, and then you just kind of fill in these 2 extra notes, do, da, do, da, and those notes they just are fill-in notes because your hands are going right, left for a second. And then there are people who just base their whole world out of that natural sort of where your hand would naturally fall. Dave's whole approach is like, it doesn't have to fall anywhere natural. You craft a part by the way it sounds, and then you practice it until it becomes natural. And that so affected me in everything. But then when I in 2017, when I was there's an illustration of I think it's almost like a cartoon. We have a bunch of blind Chinese guys, and they're hanging on to an elephant. We can see the big picture, but basically one guy's holding on to the tail, and he's saying it's a rope because he's blind and he's trying to figure it out. And then another guy's holding on to the leg of the elephant, and he's saying, no, it must be a tree. So this is the trunk of the tree. And another one's holding the trunk of the elephant and saying, no, it's a snake. But when you get back far enough, you all of a sudden you see how all these parts relate. And that's where in 2017, where it just hit me, just like it's like a thought I'd never thought of before, which is there is no side. And I'll explain that in videos as I go, but this is it came from Dave's freeing sort of idea of how linear can be. And then when I realized that you can basically have these 2 kind of linears integrated, I just went, that's the idea I've been looking for my whole life. I can't talk enough about the written page. I am very visually oriented. When I see notes on a page, there are things that just make sense that would never make sense if I was just to imagine the notes. And so now I can't. I remember I was teaching at this place, and the guy who works on the drum floor, he had never taken lessons. He'd never read anything. And one day he goes, hey, Larry, when you're doing all these shows, like, do you just see notes kind of in the air? Like when you're playing, do you just see the notes and that's what you're kind of doing? And I thought that was such a fascinating question. I was like, no, but yes. It's kind of like they're both become the same thing. On one end of the spectrum is the sound and the feel, and the other end is the rationalizing of the notes and the count and what limb and what the order is. And so, but after a while, they're not 2 ends of the spectrum. You turn it and it's all one giant thing. it becomes all part of that spectrum where you can just jump around. If you go, oh, well, wow, I just played, and it sounds like the bass player is going to play the E of 3 on every seventh measure. And you go, oh, well, I'll just make sure that in the chorus, I play the E of 3 every time it comes around, because that's part of the song, right? And so I know where that's at. I also know what it sounds like. And so I can access it in two different ways. Really huge about the written page. I love organizing notes on the written page. And like I tell the students all the time, is that the written page is one of the great things you could ever learn so that you can throw it away. You learn it on the page so you can organize these ideas better, understand it, rationalize it, cognate it, and then you basically play it until you move across, until you can feel it and sing it. And you just feel it. And then you know what those phrases feel like. But you don't start with that, because if you do, you'll end up back at the basic sort of crawling sort of idea of what just happens. But some of these ideas are just built in such an unusual way that you would never form them that way. Dave Garibaldi, like no one else, transformed how I think about music on the written page into the groove. So like I said, I got this big pop music thing. I think it's because I sing and I just follow the melody, and I just like the melodies so much. And that basically you have this idea that even in a pop setting, it's completely possible to write something that is far, far more interesting than we're allowing. We just don't want to go there. We would rather go and just go, look, I can run the 50-yard dash faster than anybody. I can balance 25 plates on my drumstick. And you miss the entire point of details. Details can be so many different things. Once you get in there, there's two worlds, right? There's kind of the macro and the micro. And when you get in there, there's the macro, which is what they call the big kind of Olympic sort of flamboyant sort of drumming. And then you get to the micro. Dave is a master at the micro. He is a master at this is why he's a legendary figure, right? So a lot of times you could hear a song that's, basically your classic sort of triplet-based R&B, long, bluesy kind of feel, Tower Power, and you might overlook it. Man, you do not want to overlook that stuff. Dave's got a way of playing stuff that's very, very subtle, and if you don't have an eye for those kind of details, you'll just blow it off, and you just won't consider it. His books radically changed my life. When I went through and got rid of all of these books, I saved a couple books, and that was it. I got rid of everything. And I saved Future Sounds, and I saved Linear Time Playing. And those books are, peas in a pod for me of how I approach drumming. I can't understate the unbelievable impact from the written page to be able to create organized details that then I can practice and put into my playing. Dave Garibaldi, I owe that to you. This is for you.